Trump. Let's move on to the Strait of Hormuz. Trump remained defiant today after being rebuffed by NATO allies who refused to help secure shipping through the strait. Let's take a listen to what he had to say earlier.
We don't need help. That war has been long prosecuted, as far as I'm concerned, almost from day one. We knocked out many of these things. I think NATO's making a very foolish mistake, and I've long said that I wonder whether or not NATO would ever be there for us. So this was a great test, because we don't need them, but they should have been there.
Well, so Kethevane, Trump seems to really have taken this personally.
Yes, he, in a way, has acknowledged now, which is different from what we heard yesterday, where he was saying that they were going to announce a list of countries that were joining efforts in the Strait of Hormuz. Now he seems to have understood that at least the NATO allies, they're not willing to get into it. And he's very frustrated by those NATO allies. And you heard Donald Trump over and over again during that briefing, if you will, in the Oval Office, talk about how the U.S. doesn't need anyone, didn't need any help anyway, but at the same time, frustrated that the help is not coming from those European allies. Going back to something that he's been saying for years now, that the NATO allies, especially the Europeans, somehow owe it to the United States to come and help them when the U.S. needs them. He also talked about this idea that we were always wondering whether the NATO allies would be there for the United States when we would need them. First of all, NATO is a defensive alliance. The one time that Article 5 was invoked was to help the Americans when they came under attack after 9/11. It is not an alliance that is supposed to come and help the ones who are doing the attacking, the United States and the Israelis. And there's also the question of now you want allies that you didn't consult before entering a war to come and help you after the fact, 2 weeks on from the first strikes on Iran. So a lot of frustration from Donald Trump. And he was, at the end, asked by several reporters whether there would be consequences about these NATO allies not joining to help in the Strait of Hormuz, and whether or not he would pull the U.S. out of NATO. Donald Trump sort of sidestepped that question, even though he did say, if I wanted to, I could. I don't need Congress. That is not true. As part of the National Defense Authorization Act passed under Joe Biden at the end of his term, there is a new law that prevents U.S. presidents from unilaterally pulling out of the NATO alliance if they don't have either the support of 2/3 of the Senate or an act of Congress. And one of the main architects of putting that element into the NDAA was the current Secretary of State, Marco Rubio.